morning, Rabbi Saeed. Today's daf is Beitzah Yud Gimel, egg number 13. Today's sponsors, we have a TALMUD TORAH sponsorship by Shaindy Avraham Kelman Family in memory of their beloved parents, Jerome W. Kelman, Bernice G. Kelman, Alexander J. David, and Friderica David. And by Jack Bennett in honor of Givati Brigade First Sergeant Nikolai Rappaport, who was killed in a Hezbollah ambush in southern Lebanon, February 11, 1998. And by Dr. Linda Weinberg in loving memory of her husband of 53 years, Dr. Paul Weinberg, parents Moshe Abraham David, in commemoration of his first yahrzeit. That's all. We have a week of learning sponsored by the Rosen and Miller Families. This is a chus for refuah sheleima for Chaim Yosef ben Batya, and by Saeed Sima Haken in honor of Rabbi Richter, Chaim Nachman, Dr. Buck, Moshe Abramson, Gabbi Cohen for graciously volunteering to make the outdoor Yomim Noraim Minyan happen. And by the Stanger and Weinberg Families in honor of Doug Stanger's special birthday. Thank you, Shkach. And a Daf Yomi sponsored today by Bernard and Varda Birnbaum in memory of Bernard's mother, Esther Fagel, Bess Yehuda Leib Zol, whose yahrzeit is today, the 7th day of Tishrei. So very good. Today is Beitzah Yud Gimel. Thank you so much, Moshe. Thank you, Moshe. Put your phone right here. Wow, thank you. Wow, Shulchan Aruch. They've prepared before me a table with a clock and a coffee, so we can effectively read Daf Yomi. We are starting off on Yud Beis at the 2 dots. It's about 10, 12 lines up. Amar of Yehuda, we've been on the subject of giving gifts on Yom Tov. If you separated gifts or trumot on Yom Tov, could you give those to the Kohen? It was a machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. And we're going to come out right now with a pesach at the 2 dots on Yud Beis, Amud Beis, and 12b. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel, halacha k'Rabbi Yossi. Halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, who allowed giving the gifts on Yom Tov. Rav Tuvi bereid Rav Nechemya chavalei garba de chamra. So Rav Tuvia, he had a jug of wine, de truma, and this was truma wine, Rabbosai. Also, look at Rav Yosef. He came in front of Rav Yosef. Amar lo mahu le'amtui le'kohena idna. Could I go bring it to a kohen right now on Yom Tov? Saeed's in the front row waiting for his wine on Yom Tov. Rabbosai, bring him a bottle of wine on Yom Tov. He's a kohen. So he said, Amar le, Rav Yosef said, Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. So Rav Yehuda said from the name of Shmuel, Halacha Rabbi Yossi, the Halacha Rabbi Yossi, you could bring the kohen, the truma, even on Yom Tov, and you could bring the gifts. We were debating if the gifts are comparable to the truma, machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. So you could bring the truma on Yom Tov. If you bring some wine, it's a beautiful thing. Bringing wine to a kohen, to a Talmud Chacham, it's like bringing a nesachim on the mizbeach. If you get wine from Eretz Yisrael, you can also make the people who boycott Eretz Yisrael very angry, and that's a big mitzvah because they're Rishayim. So you can get some wine from Eretz Yisrael, bring it to your local kohen. It's a beautiful thing. It's a kiyum of this Gemara. Good. The ushbezichne, the innkeeper, the host, de Rava bar Rav Chanan. So Rabbi Bar Chanan used to stay by this man, his ushbezichne. Havale isoraita dechardala. He had this bundle of mustard. Now it's bundled up, Rabbi, because it's in stalks. You have stalks of the mustard plant, and on top of the stalks are these seed pods, and he's going to ask what to do with them. Thank you, Bernie. Great to have you back. Thanks for the coffee. He says, can I squish them up? He's going to squish up the seed pods to get out the mustard seeds. And I'm going to eat these mustard seeds on Yom Tov. Maybe he's going to put them in his soup or put them in his food. But he wants to know, he has these stalks of mustard, and the mustard seeds are in the seed pods on the top of the stalk. He wants to know, can he squish them up to get out the seeds on Yom Tov? That sounds an awful lot like dosh, like threshing. Lo hava bidei. So Rava bar Rav Chanan didn't have the answer in his hand so readily. So he went to ask. Also look at to Rava. If you don't know, you go ask. It's a fabulous musar. There's a few places, 4 or 5 places in the Chumash where Rashi says, I don't know. And that's a beautiful thing. If you don't know, you go to the Beis Medrash, you ask, open up your sefer, you ask. So he goes and he asks, what's the halacha about squishing up this mustard to get out the seeds on Yom Tov? Amrlei. So he told him, what's the answer? Molelin melilos. He brought a teaching. You can molel melilos. Now this means you're taking ears of grain, you're taking the stalks of grain, and you're rolling them. You're rolling them to get off the outer husk, so you can get the grain that's inside the husk. So they're rolling them. They used to take their hands and, mamish roll them around. We're going to see later on that they would do it in their fingers on Yom Tov. You'd roll them around to get the husk off to eat them. And you can squish the kitniot. So they're squishing the kitniot. Could be even green beans, could be peanuts, could be a number of things depending how machmer you are during Pesach. But kitniot is mistama legumes, things that are seeds, that are nuts. You could squish them to get the shells, get the husks off, b'yom tov, and eat the seed that's within. Abaye has a problem with his teaching. A mola malilos me'erev Shabbos. If somebody already rolled his ears of grain, he rolled the husks off of the kernels of wheat or barley, whatever the grain is, me'erev Shabbos. So he did that erev Shabbos. So remember, the shaila is on Yom Tov. Could he squish the kitnias, squish the mustard to get out the mustard seeds, or squish the kitnias to get out the seeds on Yom Tov itself? But here's a teaching. He's mola malilot b'Yom Tov. He rolls around the grain to get off the husk from the kernel. Erev Shabbos, lemachar, and tomorrow on Shabbos itself, he's minafeach miyad liyad ve'ochel. So minafecher means fanning. Now fanning usually means he's sort of blowing, using blowing to push the husk off, like we normally have by dash. They would take a pitchfork and throw the wheat after dash is zore. So dash, they squish it to open up the kernel, and they throw it in the air and let the wind blow off the chaff, and then the wheat falls down in place and the chaff's been blown here. But here's minafech, he's fanning miyad liyad, but it's from one hand to the other. So it seems like what he's doing, he's taking this wheat that's already been molel, he's already sort of rubbed the husk off, but the husk is still there combined with the wheat. So he's taking it from one hand, and it looks like he's kind of pouring it back and forth from hand to hand. So I don't know if the lashon here, minafech, fanning, is dafka. He's fanning it. It seems like he's pouring it from hand to hand. We're going to see, so that the husks will be off and he can have the kernels itself to eat. So it says, if you've already mola erev Shabbos, then Shabbos you could minafech miyad liyad. You can pour it from hand to hand and eat this wheat. Now you've removed the husks. Aval lo b'kanun, but he can't use a funnel, which is a normal used for sorting sometimes. Lo tamchui, not a tamchui is a big platter. So the kanun and the tamchui are famous from Bora that these are not normally used for sorting, but sometimes used for sorting. A mola malilos me'erev Shabbos, and also if you've rolled your grain erev Shabbos to loosen off the husk, me'erev Yontiv. A mola malilos me'erev Yontiv, if you've already rolled it erev Yontiv, lemachar minafeach al yad, he can fan it from hand to another to get the husks out and only have the kernels, the seeds that he wants to eat, ve'ochel, and eat from that. Afilu b'kanon, afilu b'tamchu, you can even use the funnel, even use the big plate, which are sometimes used for sorting, for borer. Avolo b'tavla, you can't use a board, because that's normally used for sorting a large amount. V'lo v'nafe, and not a sieve, v'lo v'kivra, and not a kivra is a fine sieve. So Rashi points out here, you can't use a tavla. It's three lines from the bottom. It looks like he's doing it for tomorrow, because you use these things, this tamchui, the naf, and the kivra, to sort a large amount. So if you're already sorting a large amount, removing a large amount of the husks from the seeds, it looks like you're not doing it for today's use to eat it right now in Shabbos. It looks like you're, or Yontiv in this case, it looks like you're doing it already for tomorrow. This is in the Rashi still. You don't use these big kelim, ele harbe. They make a lot of sorting. These make a lot of borer possible. So we don't let you use them on Yom Tov, but we do allow you to use the kanun and the tamchui, which are sometimes used for sorting, but only in a small amount. So remember, there's this chiluk in borer. We're gonna do borer al regel achas, because I have to give a plug. The Smichas Chaver program is having a test soon. It's October 3rd. You can still sign up for the test, I believe. And then after that, we're starting a new zman, a new subject matter. So God willing, all of you, if you can learn Daf Yomi, you can learn Smichas Chaver. It's halacha l'maisa. But borer, we learned about. Borer has a mnemonic called ayil. Ayil is Aleph Yud Lamed. The Aleph is for Ochel. You're going to eat it right away. We discussed, what's right away. If you're setting up for your Suda, you're about to sit down and have a Suda, that works. Yad is with your Yad. You're selecting with your hand and not with these instruments, not with this kanun and the kivra and the tamchui and these things like this. You're not using a kli on Shabbos, you're using your hand. Now a fork can be an extension of a hand. If you have something slimy, something wet, your fork could be an extension of your hand already, but you're not using a sieve, a sifter, a board that's normally used for sorting, things like this. And the lamed and ayil is la'alter. Immediately, you're about to have a suda like this. The aleph ochel is you're taking the ochel mitoch psolis. You're not taking the psolis off the ochel, you're not taking the husks out from the food mixture. You're taking the food out from the mixture of food and husks or klipot or nutshells or whatever it is. So ayil, ochel yad la'alter. So that's borer. So this is a shaila and borer. So he said on Shabbos you can do it with your hand. You can wave back and forth with your hand if you've already squished the grains, but not with a kli. And on Yom Tov, you can even use some kalim, not all the kalim, not the kalim used for big amounts, said Rashi, but the kalim used for a small amount that aren't official sifters and sorting type of kalim. But we see from this, remember, this was if he's already molel Erev Shabbos. And the original question was, can I squish my mustard stalks on Yom Tov itself to use the mustard seeds? And this was talking about we were molel Erev Shabbos or Erev Yom Tov, then we get to sort them, we get to do sort of a shtickle borer. It's not really a borer, because again, ayil, it's ochel yad la'alter, it's not really a borer in that case. We can do that if we'd already molel Erev Shabbos. So, okay. Lo bekivro erev Yom Tov in. So erev Yom Tov in. So if you've already done molel erev Yom Tov, so I'm already getting ahead of myself in. Of a Yom Tov lo, but it's mashma. You can't do molel on Yom Tov itself. The molel is the rolling off the husk. That's the first stage to get the husk loosened from the seed. So it's mashma. You can't do that on Yom Tov. So it's mashma. This innkeeper can't roll his mustard seeds to extract the seed. So the Gemara answers, a field tame of Yom Tov. You could even do this on Yom Tov itself, the first stage of rolling it to loosen the husk. I did tell the Reisha Me'erev Shabbos, since the Reisha said Me'erev Shabbos, you'd have to do this molel Erev Shabbos. You can't do that on Shabbos itself. That's mamish a borer or a zoreh. Tana Seifa Nami Me'erev Yom Tov. It also says Me'erev Yom Tov, but it's lavdafka. You could even do molel on Yom Tov itself. So even if he brought in these mustard seeds, he could roll them to open up the seed pods and take out the seeds to eat them. And the same with grains. He could roll them in his hands, we're going to see, to take off the outer husk, the bran of the grain, and eat the seed within. Im ken metzinu truma shezakai b'haramata. So we see that there's a truma you could make on Yom Tov. This gets back to our Mishnah that we had yesterday, where it's a machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. That there's two versions, but we compare the matanos kahuna. The matanos kahuna are the various parts of the animal. We compare it to truma. And the argument there, the logical argument was, well, you can't separate truma on Yom Tov. You can't separate truma, and there was a comparison between truma and the matanot. If the matanot are like truma, you can't separate on Yom Tov, so you shouldn't be able to give it to a kohen on Yom Tov either. But if they're not exactly the same, maybe you could give the matanot on Yom Tov, because it's not like a truma. But here's a truma you could get on Yom Tov. Because why? Because you're rolling it, you're separating the chaff off of the wheat, you're separating the seed husk off of your mustard seeds. So now that you're done with it, you've separated it out, it's ready to eat. Now it's chayiv and truma. So you have a situation where your chayiv and truma, your chayiv truma kicks in on Yom Tov itself. You've got to take truma before you eat it. And we've said you could do this, you could separate off these husks and you could go ahead and eat it. It's non, and the Mishnah says, Lo ima martin betruma she'eino zakei b'rata. The Mishnah said the logic of Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel said, Lo ima martin betruma she'eino zakei b'ramata. Tomer b'matana she'zakei b'ramata. That's Beis Hillel's logic at the end of the Mishnah. He says, no, you can't have a situation where you are chayiv in truma on Yom Tov itself. So it's not like the matnos kahuna, where if you slaughter an animal, you take out the Zerah, the Chaim, and the Keva, these parts of the animal, immediately, and give them to Kohen immediately on Yom Tov itself, because the Chiyav kicks in when you slaughter an animal, which of course is mutter on Yom Tov for Simchas Yom Tov, because you need the meat. We just said you could give wine to the Kohen, and you could have meat on Yom Tov. That's what the Rambam says. You need meat and wine. So you make a Simcha, meat and wine. So I expect when you guys make a bris, you make a L'chaim, meat and wine. That's what we're expecting, according to the Rambam. So he says, beautiful. We have a truma that you can have on Yom Tov itself. It's not like what Beis Hillel was saying in the Mishnah. Lo kasha. It's not a kasha. To go on top of Yud Gimel, finally. Ha Rebbe Yossi, Rebbe Yehuda. It's a machlokes tanaim. The Tanya, there's a brisa. Hichnis shibolim lasos mehen isa. He brought in stalks of wheat. That's shibolim. They're not processed, unprocessed wheat. And he wants to make isa. He wants to make dough. So he's going to have to thresh the wheat, separate off the chaff, and then grind it up to make flour. So there's a few steps involved before he actually gets to the final product. Ochel mehen arai. So since it's not processed yet, he can eat it arai, like a snack. Arai is the opposite of keva. So he can eat snacks from it, putter, and he's putter from meiser. It's not chayiv meiser yet, because his intention is to sort it out, thresh it out, take out the chaff, grind it up, and make a dough with it, make it into flour. So he's putter if he just eats them as whole grain wheat snacks. Lemolala, and if his intention is to lemolalan melidos, to again roll them, which rolls off the husk, and then he can eat the grain itself. He's not going to grind it up, but his intention is always just to roll off the husk and eat them as a whole grain. Rebbe Mechayev. Rebbe says he's Chayev Meiser right now, even though it's not the normal Gemar Malacha, it's not the normal final stage. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Potter. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says he's Potter. So the Rashi here said, Ochem and Arai, he says, Kolzman Shalo Doshan, Merochan, when you haven't done dosh, you haven't separated the chaff and stacked them up, Bekri, made a pile, a kri is a pile, Lo Nigmara Malachtan Latruma. That's not Gemar Malach Latruma. So what Truma requires is you've threshed the grain, you've separated the chaff, and then you pile it up. And Merich Kri is like smoothing out the pile. That means you're done with this pile, and now you're sort of, we call it Igdon, it's Dagon now. It has a shame of Dagon, not just a shame of wheat, it's Dagon now, it's finished grain, it's ready to go. That's when it's really officially Chayev Truma. So that's important, Rashi, to know it's really Mechayev Truma. And the Rebbe here says, if you're bringing it in, even it's not at that stage yet, you haven't threshed it, you haven't piled it up, you're bringing in stalks, but you just want to eat from the stalks by just rolling off the husk and eating the grain. He says, in the Rashi, he says, She'ein sofan levoli de goren acher. It's not going to have another goren. This is a goren right now, zeyu gorenan. This is its goren. Goren literally means threshing floor, but it means that we're done right now with this. So Rebbe says he's chayev in taking truma if he just brings it in to have a snack, to eat the kernels, even if he's snacking from it. He can't snack from it until he takes the truma. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Nami, Mishkachas Lekagon Shehichnis Shibalim. So we can find a truma for Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, not just for Rebbe, who says it's chayev truma right now, even though it's not processed yet. He's just going to be molal it, and then it's chayev in truma. So, but Rabbi Yehuda also, who says you bring it in for Isa, that's when it would be chayev truma, when you make it into, you finish processing it. But he could also have a case. Could go, and what's the example? Shehichnis Shibalim Losam Hen Isa. He wants to process it to make flour. He's going to make it into wheat. He's going to make the wheat into flour, and he's going to make an isa is literally a dough. V'nimlach, and he changes his mind. Nimlach aleihem l'molala, and he says, you know what? I'm not going to go through all the trouble. I'm just going to be molal. I'm going to roll off the husk and eat them as they are. B'yamtiv. He's going to eat them on yantiv. He wants to eat them right now without going through the trouble of making flour and making a dough. The tovla b'yomei. It becomes tevel on that day. It becomes tevel on the day of yantiv. Because he's changed his mind, Rabbosai. He was going to process it further, so it wasn't ready to go for truma yet. Now he's changed his mind. He's going to eat it as it is, just roll off the husk and go ahead and eat the kernels of wheat. Why not? And that's so it becomes tevel now. It's chayiv and truma now because he's changed his mind. Elamai truma. So we say truma in the Mishnah, rov truma. So most of the time, you can't have a chiyuv truma on Yom Tov itself because you're not doing this agricultural processing to bring these grains into their final stages. Remember, they're threshed and they're piled up in the kri. That's when they're chayev and truma. So usually you don't have that, but sometimes you do have that if you brought them in to just eat from them as they are, or you brought them in to make a wheat for Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and then you change your mind, I'm going to eat from them as they are. Now they're chayev and truma right now. Abaye machlokas b'shibolim. Abaye says this machlokas of Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda is by shibolim, by grains. About kitniot, but legumes, divrei kol, isuryata tovla, binding them up into a bundle. Now they're tevel. Now that's their final step for a meiser. So now they're chayev in truma and meiser right now because you've bundled them up. So most people don't process their legumes further. They leave them in the shell, they leave them on the stalk, and they just bundle them up. So let's say this supports Abaye. Misha hayalo chavili tilton. Someone had bundles of fenugreek, shel tevel, and they were tevels. They were a bundle of fenugreek, which is some kind of legume, and they're tevel. So now they're chayiv and truma. Hareze kotesh, he can sort of smash it up to get the seeds out. Umechashev, and estimate kama zera, how many seeds there are. Yesh bahen umafrish al zera, and separate on those seeds. Separate his truma and his meiser on those seeds, and then he can go ahead and eat them. Ve'ena mafrish al eitz, but he doesn't have to separate truma on the stalk. We're going to see why in a moment. My law of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, he isn't the spinning of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Chasam lo tavla. He says it's not tevel because he wants to do further processing. Here he's doing further processing. He's getting the seeds out. Hacha tavla. Here it is tevel. So there by the wheat it was tevel. It was not tevel for Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda because he wanted to do more processing. Here the kitnius that he once he's bundled them up, we say that they're done for truma. We're calling it tevel. Tevel is any food that needs to take the truma. Tevel is a mixture. You have to take out the truma and the meiser. Loi Rebbe, we say this is Rebbe. If it's Rebbe, what do you mean? A bundle of wheat can also be chayiv and meiser. What do you mean a bundle of tilton, a bundle of fenugreek, which is kitnius? Elamai, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. You're going to tell me this is Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. Lashmin and Shamine kitnius. He should say another type of kitnius, another species. Kol shaken tilton, and of course tilton. Tilton is obvious that once you bundle it up, it's done. People don't usually process their tilton further. Ela tilton is strichale. Tilton is a special case. We have to say tilton is chayiv and tevel. We would have thought to say hoil is beautiful, but I say tam eitzu pir yeshava, because the stalk tastes like the fruit, the fenugreek fruit. The fruit and the stalk have the same taste. Lifrosh nami eitzu. We should also have to take truma on the stalk itself. Kamash malan, we don't. Rabosai, we recently had a case of another item where the tree and the fruit have the same taste. Anyone remember? Esrog. The esrog is unique, and this fenugreek, this tilton, is also unique. That it has the taste is the same as the wood. The wood and the fruit have the same taste. You should know. It's a medrash. Medrash in Bereishis Rabbah. We'll go quick because we're running out of time here. It's in Bereishis Rabbah 5:9. Vayamer Elokim Tachi Aretz Talnei B'Shem Rabbi Nasan Shlosha Nichas in the Din. So this is coming attractions. Rabbi say Bereishis is coming up in 3 weeks. So get ready for Bereishis. It's a mace mitzvah to learn Bereishis with the Mefarshim because listen, I mean Simchas Torah Wednesday, then you have Thursday, Friday, and then it's Bereishis already. So we're going to get a head start right now. So he says 3 went up for din. And here's who they were: Adam, Chava, and Nachash. Adam, Chava, and the snake. Nichs and the din. Nitkokol haaretz imahen. And the earth also got punished with Adam, Chava, and the snake. Shamar arura Adam abovarecha. The land got cursed because of the sin. Shtahei mali l'cha dvarim arim, because it caused cursed things. They suggest it could be gnats and flies. It's like Vidola. He says no, that those also have a purpose in life. So Lama Nikolai, why was the earth cursed? Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Shimon, he said, Amar, She'avra al tzivui, the earth didn't follow God's plan. Okay, that invites other questions, but here he explains, Shekach Amar la Kadosh Baruch. This is what Hashem said. Tad she'aretz deshe marizriya zera, eitz pri ose pri liminehu, right? Eitz pri, a tree fruit, ose pri, that makes fruit. So what does he mean? Hila astakan, and the trees didn't do this. Ela totze aretz deshe, they did deshe. Hapri nechol v'eitz enu nechol. So Hashem's intention was that the tree would taste like the fruit, and the tree itself would be edible, in addition to the fruit. And only the esrog is like this. We see that tilton is like this, and the esrog is like this. That it has the tree and the fruit have the same kind of taste. Rabbi Pinchas Samar, they even added to the tzivui. They wanted to do the will of Hashem. Even the barren trees that don't make fruit, they're going to make perut. So that's in the future. So this is a medrash. So you should know it's not just a medrash; it's also a Rav Kook. Rav Kook says, what does it really mean? The trees were supposed to taste like the fruit, not just have fruit, but taste like the fruit. So Rav Kook says it's really a mashal to your inspiration on the path. The tree is the means to get there. The fruit is the ends. The fruit is the goal. The fruit is your goal. It's the end product, the ultimate accomplishment. But you can't have the fruit without the tree. The tree is what comes up to get you the fruit. So what Rav Kook says, that's all he said. He says people take joy only in the fruit, only in the end, the accomplishment. They don't take joy. They don't have that taste growing the tree. He says that's the struggle that we have. The original intent of Hashem in Bereishis was people would have the same gishmak, the same taste, the same energy every step of the way until they reach the goal. We remember we learned when we were kids, when they were building the Transcontinental Railroad, they had a big party at the end. They put in a golden spike. It was beautiful, but you can't have that end unless you had every step of the way. Every spike was important, not just the golden spike at the end. That's the final thing. Every step of the way is important. So something to keep in mind that every step, every daf we do is its own joy, its own energy, its own taste. Not just finishing shots. Finishing shots, beautiful. But every daf along the way is beautiful. Raising children, same thing. Oh, beautiful. They're having a bar mitzvah, a wedding, a simcha, beautiful. But every day with the children should have that same taste, the same energy. So this is what Rav Kook says. It's to bring kedusha into the whole. That was the original purpose. Now, of course, the aretz, the trees, saw this was too hard for people to do. People get a joy out of the fruit, out of the end, and not necessarily out of the means, out of the journey. But it's something, life's a journey, not a destination. Well, here, life's a journey and a destination. It's the tree and the fruit. So Kamashman, that's Tilton, that's the Esrog, that's the Bereishis Rabbah about the earth being cursed. Good. Back to the Gemara. By machlokes b'shibolin, the machlokes is by ears of grain of obakitnius, but by legumes, stalks of legumes, divrei kol isur yata lo tavla. Just binding it up does not make it tevel for truma meiser yet. Meisivei misha haylo chavile tilton. Someone had bundles of fenugreek, shel tevel, and they're tevel. They're bundled and they're tevel. It's mashma bundling them together makes them tevel. Reze kotesh, he has to squish them. Mechashev kamazera yeshbem, and calculate, estimate how much seeds is in them. Mafrish ala zera, and a mafrish ala eds. And again, he takes truma for the seeds, but not for the stalks. My love tevel tavul shel truma. Isn't this tevel of truma? Lo tevel tavul shel trumas meiser. That's actually trumas meiser, not necessarily regular truma. The Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, meiser rishon shehekdimu shibolin. What if they did meiser rishon first? Shmo tovlo, designating them it as meiser rishon makes it tevel. They had some sort of crop that's chayev in truma and meiser, but you're supposed to take truma first. Remember, truma is the 2% that goes to the Kohen, and meiser rishon is 10% goes to the Levi. What if they went out of order? And you're not supposed to do that. Rashi points out they're not supposed to go out of order. That's a lav deraisa. But he went out of order. He took the meiser rishon first. So even though this produce was not done yet, so it wasn't chayev in truma yet, but by taking the meiser rishon first, you've made it into tevel, and now you have to take the truma. And here we're actually going to talk about trumas meiser, that the Levi, when he gets his 10% meiser rishon, he takes 10% of his 10%, which is 1% of the original. You got to hold kapar. Not everyone's an accountant, but you got to hold. So the Levi is taking 10% of his meiser rishon, giving it to the Kohen. So if he got his meiser rishon first, it's now tevel. You have to take truma from the original, and he has to take trumas meiser to give to the Kohen. The Levi has to give to the Kohen. So Shmo Tovlos, designating it as Meiser Rishon, makes it Tevel L'Trumas Meiser, for Trumas Meiser. It's not necessarily Truma Gedola. Here it's Trumas Meiser because they went out of order. They took the Meiser Rishon first. So now we're talking about the Levi has to give Trumas Meiser 10% to the Kohen. Kotesh Lamali, why does the Levi have to grind it to get the seeds out? Lama. So Lemale, he could say to the Kohen, Ki heiki diachavuli, just like they gave it to me as a bundle without processing it, without crushing it up to get the seeds out. I'm going to give it to you the same way. Why don't you just give him the tilton? Amarava knasa. It's a knas because they went out of order. The Rashi speaks out. You can look at that later. They speak out. He went out of order, so we make the Levi process it before he gives it to the Kohen, because the Kohen should have gotten it first. The Rambam says he's mafsid the Kohen, because if he went out of order, the Kohen's going to lose his truma gedola. He's going to lose his 2% from the top. There's a Bryce supporting this. Ben Levi, a son of Levi, should not know lo shibolim. They gave him unprocessed ears of grain, b'masratav, for his meiser rishon. Oseh son gurin. He makes a gurin. It means he processes it. A novim, they give him grapes. Oseh son yayin. He has to make wine from it. Zaitim, oseh ton shemen. They give him olives. He doesn't put them in the martini. He makes them into olive oil. Mafresh trumas meiser. He takes 10% of his truma for trumas meiser for the Kohen. Not no le Kohen. Shekashem shetruma gedola ein a nitelis. Turning over, just like truma gedola is not taken. Ela mina gorin mina yekiv. From gorin is the threshing floor, again, that's fully processed grain. It's been dashed, it's been piled up. And yekev is the press. That means you've made it into your wine or your oil. Kach trumas meiser, so trumas meiser, and tell us element gorin mina yekev. So just like truma should have been processed before you give to the Kohen, so trumas meiser that the Levi gives from his meiser rishon has to be processed, even if they went out of order and gave the Levi raw stalks of wheat before giving the truma. Mechashev, so they ask, the Levi should be mechashev, should estimate. This usually means estimate. Ha medida boy, he should measure. Medida is midos, is measures. He should measure it, not just estimate. Hamani Abba Elazar ben Gimel, that's the opinion of this Tana. The Tanya, Abba Elazar ben Gimel, Omer, nechashev lechem trumatchem. As the pasuk says, it will be considered for your trumot. Your trumatchem is your plural. Your Bishtei trumot katav. He says the Torah is talking about two different trumos. Achad truma gedola, achad trumat meiser. It's comparing them according to this Tana. Kashem shetruma gedola nitelet be'omed. Just like the first truma, the 2% could be taken be'omed. If it's just standing in the pile, it's sort of an estimation. Umachshava, and even by thought. He doesn't have to verbally designate truma gedola. It could be done by thought. You could think that corner of my field is the truma gedola, and that's good enough as a designation of truma gedola. Kach trumas meiser, so trumas meiser niteles be'omed, can be done by estimation, umachshava, and even by thought. Gufa, Amar Rabbi Bahu, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Meiser Rishon, Sheikdimu b'Shibolin. They went out of order. They gave the Levi Meiser Rishon when it's still in unprocessed stalks of grain. Shmo Tovlo, but designating it, again, Rabbi said, designating it as Meiser Rishon makes it Tevel L'Trumas Meiser. So now the Ben Levi has to go and take 10% and give to the Cohen, but we make him process it first. My taima Amarav Hoil v'Yatza Alav Shem Meiser. Once you've given the name Meiser, so Meiser is automatically chayiv deraisa in Trumas Meiser, and the Levi has to take 10% and give to the Kohen. Arishaman ben Lakish, Meiser Rishon Sheikdimu b'Shibolin. Again, Meiser Rishon, they went out of order. Pater mitruma gedola. So the original crops are now pater. They went out of order. They've messed it up for the Kohen, and they're pater from truma gedola on the original produce. Shnemar haremotem mimenu trumat Hashem Meiser min a Meiser. So the pasuk says we take meiser off of the meiser. It's talking about the trumas meiser that the Levi gives the Kohen. Meiser min a meiser amarti locha. I told you have to take a meiser off of the meiser, a 10% of the Levi's 10%. V'lo truma gedola for trumas meiser, but not both truma gedola and trumas meiser. So it went out of order, like the Rambam said. There's a kanas because they were makalkal. They cause a loss to the Kohen because the Kohen's supposed to get 2% of the original, and then the Levi gets 10%. And then has to give 10% of his 10% to the Kohen's. Really, the Kohen should get 3%. 2% from the owner, from the Yisrael. Then the Levi gets 10% and gives 10% of his 10% to the Kohen's. Now the Kohen's up to 3%. Beautiful. So he should have gotten that, but now he's losing out on that first 2%. He's only getting that 1% of the total. So because they've gone out of order. So what about if they had the pile of grain already? It was finished for Truma, and that's when the Levi got hold of it. Amarle Alea Makros, as the pasuk says, an answer for you. Mikol Torimu et kol Trumat Hashem. He says they were Torem. They took Truma on all of it. The Truma of Hashem. Ma'ra'ita. So it's one Truma. So you have to take one Truma if it's a finished produce. Mar'ita. So why are you saying that if they went ahead and took Meiser Rishon first, they only give the one Truma, the Trumas Meiser, and not the original 2% that they should have done first in the first place? He says, Hi idgon, hi lo idgon. But if you have a finished product, idgon is dagon. You've heard of dagon tir shvitza. Dagon is finished grains. We call them grains. So if it's idgon, it's already in the stage of being bikri in the pile. You've smoothed out the pile. It's done processing it. It's chayav right now in Truma. So it's chayav right now in Truma Gedola, the 2% of the Kohen, and they went ahead and gave it to the Levi first before the Kohen. It's still chayav in the Truma. It's only when it hasn't been processed fully. It's not in the Kri. It's not idgon yet. It's still shibolim. It's still stocks, and they went out of order and they gave to the Levi. Then they have a problem where since they went out of order, the Kohen loses his Truma. He gets the Trumas Meiser from the Levi, but he doesn't get the original 2% from the Yisrael. Okay. This is going to be Lamaisa. We have Kohanim, we have Levim here. It's going to be Lamaisa. We're going to go back to Eretz Yisrael. You're going to have to go in order. You're going to have to learn the Psukim. You have to learn this Gemara, go back to Beitzah, Yud Gimel, and you have a pile. I made a pile, so I'm going to give 2% to Saeed. I'm going to give 10% to Levi. He's going to give 10% of his Levitic portion, his Meiser Rishon, to the Kohen also. It'll be great. So hold cup. This is important. It's going to be Lamaisa soon. Tznan Chasam, the Mishnah said, a mekolef s'urin, you peel barley. Mekalef achat ve'ochel. Peel one at a time and eat it right now. We're going to be talking about Shabbos and Yontif, we see. V'im kolef natan l'toch yado, if he peels and puts into his hand, chayev, he's chayev truma on his barley. He's peeling a bunch of them and putting them in his hand. He's already like making a pile of it in his hand. But eating one at a time is just snack. Remember, that's arai. So eating arai is a snack. It's not chayev in truma. Amar Rabbi Elazar v'ken l'Shabbos. He says same thing for Shabbos, not just for Meiser. But for Shabbos also, it's not going to be a malacha to peel one at a time and just eat from it arai. Eini, is that true? Harav mekolfale devitu kase kase. But Rav's wife, it says devitru. Devitru means his bias, because your wife is like your bias. Your wife is chachmas nashim banza baisa. She builds your house with her chachma. So we don't say his wife, we say his house. His house was his wife. She peeled for him kase kase, a cup full of barley. So on Shabbos, she was peeling a cup full of barley for him. Again, she was doing it by hand. She was doing it to eat right away. It wasn't a borer here. She was following the halachas of borer. Obviously, she was Rav's wife. Rabbi Chia's wife also peeled for him cups full of barley on Shabbos. So it can't be that it's chayav on Shabbos, because we see that the wives of Talmidei Chachamim were doing so. Their husbands would have objected. Ela Mar, a sefer Mar. If it's said, it's taught with the seifa. Hamolo malilos shalchitin. He's rolling the grains of wheat. Again, the rolling is to get off the outer husk. Minafeach al yad ve'ochel. Remember, we said that this is minafeach is literally fanning, but what seems to be happening is they have this mixture of the wheat kernels and the husks, and now they're pouring it back and forth. You've already done the malila. You've rolled up the husks loose. Now you pour it back and forth to get the grains in one place so you can eat them. So he's not. So he's minafech yad ve'ochel ve'im nachvach v'natan l'tocheko. But if he does fanning or he's blowing off the husks and he's natan l'tocheko, he puts them all in his lap, like he's making a big pile of these grains without husks. Chayev. So he's chayev. That's a problem. Rabbi Elazar v'ken l'Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar said, so too is the din for Shabbos. That you'd be able to be nefech. So we're going to have to see how this works. Markiv la Rav Abba bar Mumble. So Rav Mumble says Reisha l'maiser. Reisha l'maiser in l'Shabbos lo. He says in the Reisha you could have something that's chayev maiser. It's a malacha for maiser. Malacha. It's the gemar malacha. It's the finishing stage. It's now dagon. It's now grains. For purpose of maiser, yes, but for Shabbos, no. So how could that be in the Reisha? Where Rabbi Eliezer is saying, Ken l'Shabbos is mashma. Yeah, it's also for Shabbos, it's not a malacha. So we're saying, it's not a malacha for Meiser, it's not Chayiv and Truma and Meiser yet, and it's also not a malacha for Shabbos. What do you mean, the Ken l'Shabbos? Mi ika midi. The Inyan Shabbos lo have gemar malacha. Is there such a thing that on Shabbos it's not a malacha? La Meiser have gemar malacha, but it is a malacha for Meiser. As Rabbosai, he's saying you're doing some sort of agricultural labor that now makes your produce Chayiv, Truma, and Meiser. So it's like making the finishing touches of your produce. And Rabbi Eliezer is saying it's not chayev as a malacha on Shabbos. Can you do such a thing where you're changing the status of your grains and now they're chayev, truma, and meiser, but you haven't done a malacha on Shabbos? That doesn't really make sense. Matzki Rav Sheishis, Brady Ravidis, Rav Sheishis saves the day. Velo, is there not such a case? V'cha garnon l'meiser, the gorin, which means the finishing touch, the threshing floor for meiser. It's not, the Mishnah says, Ezehor gornon l'meiser. What is the gorin, the finishing stage that requires meiser? And this is a meiser yerik. This is for vegetables, hakishuin, the cucumbers, diluayin, and the gourds. Mishe yafsiku, when the blossom falls off. You see this sometimes in zucchini, where the zucchini has this nice yellow flower, and the fruit actually forms from right under the flower. And sometimes the flower petals are still visible on the zucchini as it's growing. So as we're talking about, when the blossom falls off, boom, that's when it's chayev meiser yerik. Shalom Pasco, even if the blossom didn't fall off yet, mishayamid arema, when you stand them up into a pile. So when you take your gourds or your cucumbers and you put them into a pile, boom, right there, they're chayev meiser. We also taught by onions, mishayamid arema. When are onions chayev and meiser? When you stand them into a pile. When you put your onions into a pile, now they're chayev meiser. That's their doga. Now they're chayev and meiser and truma. Elo Gabbi Shabbos, not truma because that's Doug Stanger, but they are chayev meiser yerik. So I misspoke. Elo Gabbi Shabbos, hamada sarema pater. But making a pile of onions on Shabbos, Rabbosai, are you chayev a malacha on Shabbos for making a pile of onions? No. Making a pile of onions is mutter on Shabbos. You can go on Shabbos, you can make a pile of onions. You have the Gemara's permission. But it does make a Gemar malacha for Meiser. So what are we saying? Meleches machsheves asra Torah, the famous statement from the Gemara in Shabbos that we know, thoughtful, constructive actions, that's what's chayev on Shabbos. We have the famous Patur, davar she'eino miskaven. He's not intending it. Now remember, Pesik Reisha could still be a problem, even if he has no intention. But without intention, it's not meleches machsheves. It's reduced. It's not a thoughtful, constructive labor. So making a pile of onions is not a meleches machsheves. It's a pile of onions. Hachanami meleches machsheves asr Torah. So for Shabbos, only a meleches machsheves is what's asr, even though that makes the grains. So we have till 6:25. Is that right? Yeah. Beautiful, wonderful, beautiful. Plenty of time. Ketzad molel, so how do we do these molilos? Remember we said on Amud Aleph, this molel is literally rolling. So we would take he's molel molilos, he's rolling his ears of grain. And remember they would kind of roll it, we're going to see like this. On a weekday you could roll it like this and really do a gishmaka rolling to get your husks up. We're going to see they're going to be rolling it like this. I'm going to explain. Abaye mishmei the Rav Yosef amar chada achada. He says one finger on one finger. which is a thumb and a finger, really. I mean, I really can't do this with my other fingers to get the grains in there, but a thumb and a finger. So that's what Abaye says, is a thumb and a finger. Rav Avia Mishmei Rav Yosef and Marchada Tartes. He says from Rav Yosef, it's more mekel, one thumb on two fingers. You could roll like this, beautiful. That's how you would get your husk off of your grain. Rav Amar Kevan de Mishane, since you're Mishane, you're changing it. Mishane is Lashon Shinui. You're making a shinui, afilu chada akulhu nami, even one on all of them. You could even take your thumb and all your fingers and roll your grains like this, nami. You could even do that. But what you couldn't do is take two hands, take a whole handful of these kernels with the husks and rub them like this. That's uvda dechol. So Rashi points out that's uvda dechol. It's a weekday activity. It's that's what you do on a weekday to make a lot of them. But if you're just having a snack, you're just having a little food on Yontiv, you could take one thumb on your fingers and roll the husks off of your kernels and go ahead and eat them on Yom Tov. The Taisvos here points out, this is important, Taisvos Ketzad Molel perish b'Yontiv. It's mutter to be molel on Yontiv, but b'Shabbos aser limlol. He points out that it's aser to be molel on Shabbos. Remember, this was the teaching we brought on Amud Aleph. If you were molel Erev Shabbos, if you were molel already Erev Shabbos and got the husks loose, then you could be menafa yad liyad on Shabbos. And if you were molel Erev Yontiv, they said it was lav dafka, it was even on Yontiv, then you could use the kivra and the tamcha, you could use the funnel and the large plate, not the normal sorting kalim, but for small amounts they could sort. You could do that. But so he says the molel is asur on Shabbos. So on Shabbos, do not roll the husks off the grain. That is a borer. Strangely, Rashi here says ken l'Shabbos. He says having mefarik told a dadash. So Rashi says this is mefarik. Mefarik is like removing something from where it grew. It's like dash. It's like taking off the husks. But he says this is dadash ke'achar yadhu. But other people say it's borer. The Ramah says based on Yerushalmi, it's borer to take the husks off. But Rashi here says it's dash, told the dash. We say milking a cow is also told the dash. It's also mefarik. But so the Tosfos points out you can do this on Yontiv. You can molel on Yontiv. On Shabbos it's aser. And in minafeach we'll get to it in a moment. But Tosfos says case of minafeach is more Shabbos. On Shabbos you can even minafeach. You can kind of move it around to get the husks off if they're already separated. But Yontiv, Shari, Af, Bekinan, Tamkoi. In the Yonkov we saw on Amud Aleph, you can use the Kana and the Tamkoi, the funnel and the large plate for this. So we talked about Molel, and now, finding my place. Ketzad Molel, Abaye, Mishmei, the Rav Yosef, Chada, Tarte, good, Rav Amar, Kevan, the Mishane, Afilu, Chada, Kulu, Nami, Ketzad Minafeach. Okay, last line, Amar Rav Ada, Barahava, Amar Rav, Minafeach, Kishrei Esbotav, on top of your Dalet, from your knuckles and down. This is, remember, how we wash on Yom Kippur. Mikishrei Esbotav, from your knuckles and on. So he says you can do this minafeach, this back and forth, only with your fingers, like how we wash on Yom Kippur. Lamola. So only that way. Machagula Marava, and Yisrael laughed at him. Kavan the Mishana, you're making a shinui, afilavakila yada nami. You can even use your whole hand, palm of your hand, to do minafeach back and forth. If you've already done the molel Erev Shabbos or on Yom Tov itself, you could do. Elamar ve'elezar minafeach biyadu achas b'kol kocho. You can use one hand to do it. Kochos. Maybe he's shaking his hand, whatever he's doing. So we have a remez to Yom Kippur, we've had a remez to the Etra, we've had remez to Bereshis. So Baruch Hashem, we've done well today, Rabosa. Thank you.